Okay, so let's begin. Thank you everyone for joining today. We know you're very busy and your time is valuable, so we're going to jump right in. My name is Rachel, and today you are at the webinar, Considerations When Choosing a Lab, hosted by Labstat and Labs-Mart. So in case you have never done business with Labstat or Labs-Mart, I'm just going to give a really quick background on who we are. Labstat and Labs-Mart are actually part of the Certified Laboratory family of labs. And what does that mean for you? Across North America, our full service laboratories provide comprehensive testing in the food, tobacco, nicotine, cannabis, vape safety, dietary supplements, vitamins, and natural health product industries. This alliance creates a one-stop shop for all of your regulatory requirements and challenges while offering a robust scope of testing services to meet your organization's needs. From concept to final testing, our teams provide the scientific intelligence you need to ensure you're growing a world-class portfolio of products. We have multiple locations with labs in both Alberta and Ontario. Our labs are GMP certified and ISO accredited. We always guarantee fast turnaround times, and we're continuously evolving our methodologies and updating our instrumentation. The analytical methods that we use in our labs have been validated and verified to be suitable for a range of matrices such as dried flower, oils and extracts, concentrates, e-liquids, and a variety of edibles and beverages. Now we're running these Learning Lab webinars every single month. So these are 1-hour webinars delivered by an expert packed with real world information you can implement immediately. And this will cover everything from cannabis topics to NHP, pharmaceuticals, and food. In November, on November 25th, we're going to be running our What's in Your Vapor webinar. And this is where we will be discussing Labstat's vape testing primer. So be sure to register for that and follow us on Twitter for more information on upcoming webinars. So again, today we're here for considerations when choosing a lab. And our expert speaker for today is Devin Sears, who is Director of Research and Development at Labs-Mart. And as Director of Research and Development, Devin is responsible for the development and validation of new analytical methodologies used for product testing across the cannabis and natural health product portfolios. You can see a couple of career highlights there for Devin. He's an excellent guy. He's super smart, and he's going to walk you through what to consider when choosing your lab. Devin, take it away.
All right, thank you, Rachel. Good morning, and thank you everyone for your time. We understand everyone is busy, and we appreciate you taking the time this morning to join us in a discussion on what to consider when choosing an analytical laboratory. To start this discussion out this morning, I'd like to provide a brief overview of the topics we will be covering. We will start by looking at what elements to look for in a reputable lab, what accreditation is and why it's important, what quality systems are and why they are important. Finally, we will explore some questions you can ask of your potential laboratory partner. You'll hear me refer to the relationship between you and your laboratory as a partnership throughout this presentation. That is because developing a strong partnership based on trust, transparency, and honesty is paramount to all other aspects we'll be discussing today. Not developing this relationship is the single most likely reason you're not satisfied with your laboratory. Hopefully, some of the content presented here today will give you some material to begin having a more impactful conversation with your laboratory or prospective new laboratories. There's recently been some controversy in the industry over lab shopping and the use of multiple laboratories. In this presentation, we hope to provide you some tools to enable you to select a laboratory that is trustworthy and thus eliminating the need for lab shopping. That said, I'd like to comment on the practice of laboratory shopping. Under Canada's Good Production Practices, or GPP, the responsibility of ensuring the quality of a product that is released to the market falls to the grower and producer. The use of analytical testing laboratory is a component of this process. However, the ultimate responsibility to release the product belongs to the grower or producer. Should an analytical result be outside of what is expected, it is the responsibility of the grower or producer to conduct a complete and thorough investigation into the suspect result. This should be done in collaboration with the analytical laboratory. If laboratory error is suspected as the root cause, a secondary lab can be used to verify the results. That said, the grower or producer should be conducting such an investigation with a secondary lab under their deviation and investigation processes as part of their quality system. By doing so, the use of a secondary lab will be well documented and justified. Additionally, if the second lab calls into question the primary laboratory's results, the qualification of the primary laboratory should be reevaluated. We strongly recommend all growers and producers to engage with their laboratories to discuss how the laboratory procedures and policies fit within their specific quality systems, thus ensuring compliance to GPPs. In particular, for this case, the laboratory's investigation procedures should align with the grower and producer's internal investigation procedures to result in complete and thorough investigations to be completed by the grower and producer. If you have any questions on how to conduct quality investigations or how to write concise and effective investigation reports, please contact us and we would be happy to provide consultation services. Okay, moving on to considerations to make when choosing a laboratory. Choosing a laboratory can be a daunting task, especially when one considers the release of final product is contingent on the analytical testing results. This translates to a large amount of money being at risk every time a product goes out for testing. This risk can, however, be minimized by the appropriate choice of a laboratory partner. From a risk control perspective, the proper choice of a laboratory is one of the single largest mitigation strategies a grower producer has at their disposal. The way I view selecting a laboratory partner is a pillar and plank model. There are 3 pillars, those being service, expertise, and accreditation. The planks of price and turnaround time rest on these 3 pillars. If you are having an issue with a lab regarding turnaround time or price, chances are the 3 underlying pillars are really at fault. So in the next few slides, we will dive into specifics around each of the pillars and planks. At the heart of a successful selection process to choose a laboratory is the development of a relationship. This relationship must be based on trust and a deep understanding of the laboratory's strengths and weaknesses. You also need to develop an understanding of the scientific capabilities of the laboratory, which will inform you of the lab's ability to investigate suspect results and troubleshoot analytical issues as they arise. The keys to building a successful relationship really hinges on communication. Does the lab have dedicated staff to communicate with you, ensuring you have all the information necessary for you to make critical decisions? Such a flow of information must be transparent and scientifically sound. The laboratory should also offer tools and options to deliver your results and respond to your inquiries that best suit your needs. We recognize that not all companies operate according to the same business model, and as such, finding a laboratory that provides your results in a meaningful and impactful format is critical in establishing confidence in the laboratory's abilities to consistently meet your expectations. Additionally, you should evaluate how the laboratory responds to your requests. Does the lab have dedicated personnel, such as account managers, that provide clear, concise, and correct responses to your inquiries? This key point of contact is the cornerstone to the relationship you should be building with your laboratory. These account managers should serve as the conduit to other resources should you need technical help. That said, the laboratory should be willing to provide access to scientific staff capable of answering any of your technical questions. Lack of sufficient scientific staff and their lack of availability should be a red flag. This could be an indication that the laboratory does not have sufficient scientific expertise you require to solve problems critical to your business. The importance of expertise will be discussed in the next few slides. When choosing a laboratory, it's vitally important to identify what your needs are. Most laboratories have specific areas of expertise. For example, some laboratories specialize in environmental chemistry, some specialize in oil and gas, and some specialize in pharmaceutical analysis. Not all of these labs may be equipped or staffed to test your products. As a grower or producer, you need to have an understanding of what testing your product is required to undergo, and then source a laboratory capable of performing the necessary testing. In the cannabis industry, you will need a laboratory well-versed in analytical instrumentation, such as GC, HPLC, LC-MS-MS, and GC-MS-MS. Additionally, you will need a laboratory capable of performing microbiological examination of your product. When choosing your laboratory, it's very important that you interact with the scientific staff. You need to identify if they have the expertise to not only operate the analytical instruments, but have the knowledge to perform the critical separations and troubleshoot issues that may arise when analyzing your samples. Determining scientific expertise can be extremely difficult, especially if you don't have a scientific background. Some simple tips to evaluating the scientific aptitude of your laboratory are: 1, titles do matter. Does your laboratory have dedicated scientific staff, such as research scientists, principal scientists, senior scientists, etc., or are there just simply laboratory analysts and technicians? The lack of dedicated, highly trained staff should be a red flag indicating the lab may not have the resources necessary to address analytical issues as they arise. Second, does the lab speak in absolutes? Science is a process of developing theories and designing experiments to prove or disprove the theory. It is an iterative process and rarely results in absolutes. If a lab tells you they absolutely have a method that is capable of determining an analyte in the matrix that you have, you should start asking questions. The first question should be, is the method validated? The second question should be, is it validated for my matrix? Towards that, the last question there, you should inquire about the experience they have with your specific matrix. If a laboratory speaks in absolute terms despite not having experience with your specific matrix, this should be another red flag. And finally, what is a laboratory's investment strategy for new technology? Analytical technology is constantly evolving and improving. The quality of results a laboratory obtains is directly correlated to the quality of instrumentation they use to determine your results. If your laboratory does not have any plans for future capital investment and/or has an aging fleet of instruments, you should be asking what their strategy is with respect to new technologies. Failure of a lab to have a strategy around keeping current with technology is another red flag. And at some point, this lab will be far behind industry standards, putting the quality of your data at risk. To further this point, I wanted to show you an example of where a laboratory's scientific expertise is a critical component of solving problems in real time. In 2019, it was highlighted that cannabinoids in a chocolate matrix can be a difficult separation. This presented a challenge to producers trying to make such products. Before a solution to this problem could be proposed, we needed to first understand what the root cause of the problem was. Looking at the constituents of chocolate, one will see that most chocolates, particularly milk chocolates, have high lipid or fat content. This is important because cannabinoids are fat soluble. In fact, cannabinoids are so fat soluble that they prefer to stay in the fat matrix rather than move into or partition into the extraction solvents traditionally used to extract cannabinoids from other matrices. This presented a technical challenge in the sample preparation of cannabis products containing chocolates. A laboratory without the necessary scientific expertise will not be equipped to, 1, understand the technical details of the problem, or 2, solve such technical problems. In the case of chocolate, Labs-Mart has developed a multi-stage preparation process using an annealing step to take advantage of the lipid cannabinoid solubility differences to remove the lipids from the matrix. Another component of the expertise a laboratory should possess is a detailed understanding of the regulations guiding the testing of cannabis products. The Canadian Good Production Practices, or GPP, have laid out minimum testing requirements for all products. Shown here are the tests identified in the GPP as required for cannabis products. However, not all of these tests are required for all products at every step of the manufacturing process. Finding a lab capable of navigating the regulatory requirements is very important to help you understand what testing is required and at each stage of your production process. If you have any questions regarding testing requirements under GPP, please contact us and we'd be happy to provide consultation service to first understand your product and then develop a testing strategy to meet the requirements of GPP. While Canada's GPP does not explicitly impose a standard against which cannabis products need to be tested, They do spell out that products should be tested using validated analytical methods. As I stated previously, testing does introduce a risk to your ability to release your products to the market. The single best way to mitigate this risk is to find a lab that is either ISO 17025 accredited or has an established quality system, preferably running under good manufacturing practices or GMP. These systems will ensure that there are appropriate procedures and policies in place to allow the lab to demonstrate they meet the basic requirements of GPP. Additionally, these quality systems provide assurances that the lab has policies in place to guide how the lab executes testing, reviews data, maintains equipment and facility, investigates suspect results, manages change and deviations, manages corrective actions and preventative actions, and performs analyst training. A laboratory should understand the value of these quality systems and be willing to discuss these systems with you to reassure you of their effectiveness in the laboratory. A laboratory that is reluctant to discuss change management or how they conduct laboratory investigations is a red flag for a weak or ineffective quality system. A laboratory with a strong quality management system helps safeguard your product by ensuring the results of the lab provides you are authentic, contemporaneous, and attributable. In other words, under these quality systems, the lab can provide traceability of the results back to who collected the data, when the data was collected, and which instrument was used to collect the data. These data provide a complete recreation of the test performed, allowing for detailed investigation and understanding of the results. These systems will also capture any changes or deviations that have been made during the execution of the test to allow management and scientific staff to assess the scientific impact of the change on the final result. This is a critical aspect of maintaining control of testing in the laboratory. So now the question becomes, what is best for you, ISO 17025 or GMP? We will dive into the differences between ISO and GMP and provide you tools to answer this question in the next few slides. Let's start this discussion by first understanding the differences between ISO and GMP standards. While it would be satisfying to have a direct comparison of one standard to the other and discuss their likenesses and differences, this is not easily accomplished because the two standards are not directly comparable. The reason for this lack of correlation is that there are two differing philosophies underlying the two standards. Starting with ISO. ISO accreditation is a demonstration of a laboratory's adherence to a set of industry standards. The standards are specific to a particular test and often a particular sample matrix. For example, a lab might say they are ISO accredited. You should then ask for the scope of their accreditation. This scope identifies the specific tests for which they have demonstrated themselves to be proficient. So for a laboratory to claim ISO accreditation for the analysis of cannabinoids in cannabis products, they must have completed the accreditation process with a recognized third-party accrediting organization. The process of accreditation involves, 1, demonstrating the method is validated for the analytical method and sample matrix, 2, completing a laboratory audit, and 3, participation in a proficiency testing program. Subsequent to that, the laboratory is responsible for maintaining accreditation through continued participation in a proficiency testing program, thus continually demonstrating their capability to perform the tests. To maintain accreditation of a large catalog of tests can be quite burdensome on the laboratory, which is why a lab will often have a limited scope of accreditation. In contrast, GMP is a more holistic approach to managing laboratory operations. Under GMP, the laboratory must institute procedures and policies, also referred to as quality systems. The adherence of staff to these quality systems ensure that all data produced by the lab meet a minimum standard. A lab operating under GMP will have procedures in place that control every aspect of the testing process, from sample receipt to final data review and issuance of certificate of analysis. These quality systems also include aspects of method validation and instrument calibration and maintenance. While it is tempting to start drawing parallels between ISO and GMP, then compare and contrast at this point, That exercise only confuses the two even more. Simply put, ISO is a standard set forth by the industry for a particular test, where GMP is an overarching collection of procedures and policies that ensure all data collected in the laboratory meets a minimum standard, which is set by Health Canada. Under GMP, each method should be validated, but individual methods are not accredited. In the next couple of slides, we'll explore the differences between accreditation and quality systems a little further. So what is accreditation and why does it matter? Accreditation is the formal recognition that a laboratory is competent and credible in the execution of a specific test. This provides a common framework to ensure results are reported accurately, consistently, and without bias. Accreditation provides assurances through a third party that the laboratory is conducting the test correctly and the resulting data conforms to the standards set forth by the third party. Furthermore, accreditation ensures the laboratory's adherence to the standards that have been set, verified by a lab audit. What are quality systems and why do they matter? A quality system is a collection of procedures, typically called SOPs or standing operating procedures, and policies that state how activities are to be performed in the laboratory. There are several key quality systems a GMP laboratory must include. These are a quality unit, which is a definition of quality control and quality assurance groups, their roles and responsibilities. Quality, which is a collection of test methods and procedures to ensure that the laboratory is capable and ensure the laboratory's capability to accurately and correctly execute test procedures. Facility and maintenance, which is a collection of procedures to ensure the facility and instruments and equipment are properly maintained and kept in good working order. Change and deviation management. These are procedures and practices in place to ensure changes and deviations from written procedures are adequately documented and approved. Corrective actions and preventative actions. These are documented assessments of failures in the laboratory and evaluation of 1, how to correct the immediate problem, and 2, how to prevent the problem from occurring in the future. And lastly, laboratory controls. These are procedures in place governing how the laboratory uses checks and balances to ensure the quality of the data generated. These controls will include things such as documentation practices, control of reference materials and standards, expiry of reagents and solutions, how data is analyzed and approved. Collectively, these systems exist to ensure that all tests performed in the laboratory meet a minimum standard and the results obtained will be accurate and correct. It should be noted that regulatory agencies such as Health Canada and the FDA do not accredit laboratories. They only inspect. So for example, here at Labs-Mart, we hold an establishment license from Health Canada, which allows us to test pharmaceutical products. Health Canada routinely inspects us as part of maintaining that establishment license. Be wary of any lab that claims to be accredited or certified by Health Canada, as these designations are not given by Health Canada. So what is the right choice then, ISO or GMP? And that answer depends on 2 things. 1, what are your needs? And 2, what are your preferences? Again, under Canada's GPP, there are no regulatory requirements for standardized testing of cannabis products. The only requirement is that the methods used be validated. Under both ISO and GMP standards, methods need to be validated. Therefore, either is a viable option for your needs. That said, not all testing required by Health Canada is currently available for accreditation under ISO. This means that for those tests, you will need to perform the tests at a laboratory that at a minimum has validated test methods. To ensure that these validation activities have been completed, the use of a GMP laboratory is recommended. The best case would be to use a laboratory that has both systems in place. This would provide the best possible risk mitigation strategy to your testing risk, in that not only has the lab demonstrated proficiency in the specific testing you require, but that there are also strong underlying quality systems in place to catch and document any changes or deviations that occur during the testing of your product. With the exception of exporting outside of North America, Either ISO or GMP will suffice, provided the laboratory holds a license for analytical testing of cannabis. Export outside of North America will require testing under GMP in order to meet the mutual recognition. I'm sorry, let me back up. Export out of North America to the European Union will require testing under GMP in order to meet the mutual recognition requirements imparted by the EU. Under mutual recognition, the EU regulatory agencies recognize a Health Canada GMP establishment license as an equivalent to an EU license and thus accepts GMP testing of cannabis materials for import in the EU. Again, it is important to stress that you need to select a lab based on your specific needs. If you have a higher risk tolerance and are using a lab for a specific test, then an ISO accreditation will suffice. However, if you are developing a product, testing for export, or have a lower risk tolerance toward a laboratory's impact on product release, then use of a GMP laboratory is recommended. Finally, if your risk tolerance is very low, finding a lab that is both ISO accredited and GMP compliant may be the best option. A thorough risk analysis and understanding your business's risk tolerance will help guide this decision. That concludes the discussion of the pillars that create a strong laboratory. Now we can turn our discussion to the planks that rest on those pillars, namely turnaround time and price. Turnaround time is a commitment between the laboratory and you to deliver results in agreed upon time frame. Your lab should be very clear on these commitments. In fact, the lab should have a deep understanding of their ability to meet these commitments, not just with you, but with all of their customers. Your lab should be willing to share these metrics to help you understand their ability to meet these commitments. With all that said, analytical testing is still scientific work. And as we have all experienced, nothing goes according to plan when science is involved. There are going to be times when an analysis does not work. This could be due to a new sample matrix. It could be due to laboratory error. It could be due to instrumentation issues. Nonetheless, the time that a lab commits to turning around your results will not include these situations where the analysis is not working. Your lab should have a clearly defined process in place to ensure you are notified as soon as possible that the analysis is not working properly. This notification should also include a summation of what is known at the time as to why there are problems, the next steps to solving the problem, and the timelines for those next steps. As frustrating as it may be, a good lab will be honest with you and tell you they cannot provide an exact time they will have your result if the problem is complex. They will, however, provide you with the plan to investigate the problem, the timeline to execute the plan, and then provide you regular updates. As with most scientific endeavors, rarely does the first theory prove the hypothesis and solve the problem. This is very often an iterative process that requires constant evaluation and reevaluation of data. A well-run investigation, however, will not only solve the problem, but understand the root cause and allow the lab to implement corrective actions to prevent the problem from occurring in the future. So while it may be frustrating, a thorough scientific investigation is always the correct solution to solving these problems. Other factors that can affect turnaround time are: 1, staffing level fluctuations due to illness and turnover. 2, the frequency that the lab executes your requested test. If the requested test is routine, the lab will be regularly executing the test and will have a higher likelihood of meeting shorter turnaround times. Non-routine tests often require additional resources, such as sourcing new reference materials, setting up older methods, and retraining of staff. These factors often heavily contribute to a laboratory's inability to meet short turnaround times. A good lab will openly communicate tests that are routine and non-routine and will request longer turnaround times for the non-routine test methods. And lastly, new sample matrices. New sample matrices are the last common factor that will affect turnaround time. A new sample matrix will not only behave, a new sample matrix may not behave the same under conditions of extraction and sample preparation as prescribed by the test method. This can lead to suspect results in subsequent investigations. The easiest way to avoid these delays in turnaround time is to make sure your lab is aware and prepared for your new sample matrix. This may require the lab to do some additional development work and possibly some additional validation work. You will need to provide test samples to the lab for this development to ensure they are working with your specific matrix. The second plank to consider when selecting a laboratory is price. While price is often the first or one of the first items considered when choosing a lab, I caution that with laboratory testing, you often get what you pay for. In order to maintain quality systems and ensure high quality testing standards, laboratories have to expend a significant amount of resources. These resources include capital expenditures, instrument maintenance and qualification, quality system administration, and staff training. My recommendation is to look at the partnership you want to develop with your lab before you begin the price negotiation. Assessing the value your lab provides to you and the potential risk mitigation will help you put into perspective the prices offered by the lab. Laboratory pricing is much like buying insurance. The better policy with greater coverage will obviously cost more. And yes, you won't be happy that you spent the money until you need it. Next, I want to cover a topic that is often overlooked. Continuous improvement is not only a tenet of ISO, but a critical component of GMP, sometimes referred to as CGMP, where the C means current. A lab's investment in continuous improvement and commitment to these concepts demonstrates their ability to stay current and provide you the best possible analytical solutions, not only today, but tomorrow. This improvement will be crucial in the continuous lifecycle management of your products and will become the hallmark of a strong relationship between you and your laboratory. Before moving on to questions to ask your lab, I just want to make a quick comment about laboratory audits. Laboratory audits are a crucial component to providing you a rubber meets the road, kick the tires type of experience with the laboratory. It is important, however, to keep in mind that audits are very resource intensive for the laboratory. As such, do not expect a laboratory to agree to an audit without some commitment of sample volumes. A good laboratory will be happy to answer basic questions regarding their processes and quality systems. However, to answer extensive questionnaires and host an audit ties up valuable laboratory resources and therefore should be reserved for later in the selection process. So in this last section, I wanted to leave you with some questions to consider and ask a lab when evaluating them. The first slide is a set of high-level questions that are open-ended and should lead to an engaged conversation between you and your laboratory. An unease or unwillingness to discuss these topics should be immediate red flags. These topics include experience. Do they have the technical and scientific expertise and experience in the products that I need tested? How can they demonstrate this expertise? Method validation. Does the laboratory have procedures for method validation, and are the testing methods you require validated? Reputation and trust. Does the lab have quality systems in place that assure the lab's activities will be traceable, accurate, and correct? New products. Does the laboratory have the scientific capability to partner with you in the development of analytical testing appropriate for your product, both old and new? And finally, customer-centric. Does the lab have the passion and drive to collaborate with you to help drive your product quality? Finally, in this slide, I am providing 10 specific questions you can use to start these conversations with your prospective laboratory. 1, is there a quality system in place with a quality assurance department? 2, are they accredited or do they have an establishment license with Health Canada? 3, will any of the testing be outsourced to another laboratory? 4, what is the chain of custody for the sample, and is this process proceduralized? 5, are there written procedures and schedules for instrument calibration and maintenance? 6, are there written and validated test methods for the analyses you require? 7, what level of expertise does the lab possess, particularly in dealing with your particular sample and matrix? 8, how is raw data captured, evaluated, and reviewed, and is this proceduralized? 9, based on the sample matrix and workload, does the laboratory anticipate on-time delivery of the results? And 10, if unexpected results are obtained, is there a written procedure to investigate the results to assure the results are valid? So these are some very specific questions that will allow you to work with your laboratory and really drill down on their practices and procedures. So with that, I would like to conclude today's presentation. I'd like to thank you for your time. We here at Labstat and Labs-Mart appreciate you taking the time to hear our perspective on what to consider when choosing an analytical laboratory. At this time, I'd like to open up the floor for any questions the audience has.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Devin. As Devin said, if you have any questions, now is the time. You can see the Q&A window at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to type in any question you might have about anything that Devin covered today or any other burning questions you might have about working with a laboratory.
I know there's a question. Let me just pull it up here.
Can you see it? So it says, what samples could you accept from the US into Canada to test, or what paperwork is needed?
So accepting samples from the US into Canada would require an import license. So you as the testing, or us as the testing facility, would need an import license to import that sample from the US to Canada.
Everybody's shy today.
It's a lot to take in.
There is a lot to consider. You know, I think your questions that you offered, and maybe that's a screen we could go back to, because that's probably a screen people are still sort of processing, the idea of which questions now based on where they're at and where they're at in assessing their labs, perhaps. There's a number of really important questions you've offered there. So again, everyone, you will get a copy of this presentation so that you'll have these questions to take away with you.
We did get another question from Shelley. Are there typical turnaround times, or are they unique to each sample? This is really going to be a laboratory specific question based on what their routine and non-routine testing are. You know, industry standard is about 5 business days turnaround time, with most labs offering expedited turnaround time at a premium fee. Non-routine testing, typically, depending on the nature of the test, it could be 10 business days, 15 business days, or even 20 business days, depending upon lead time of reagents and materials, you know, staffing, training staff, and so forth. So it really depends, but on average, I would expect a 5-day turnaround time for routine tests.
Great question. I'm wondering, Devin, if someone needed a faster turnaround time, do you guys offer expedited service, and what does that look like?
So here at Labs-Mart, for our routine testing, we offer a 3-day and 2-day turnaround time with premiums applied to each one of those in a tiered fashion.
So I think we'll wrap up there today, folks. Again, if you're interested in more information about Labstat or Labs-Mart, do reach out. Our next webinar will be on November 25th. Again, we're going to talk about vapor testing. What's in your vapor? So really important for anyone who's making a vape product. Follow us on Twitter at Labstat_INT or on LinkedIn for more information and to stay up to date on our upcoming webinars. Thanks again, everyone, for your time. And thank you, Devin, again, for always being so informative. And we'll see you on the next one. Have a great day, everyone.